See, it's big enough to where I can see the screen and see what people are doing. I'm saying, great. I love it. All right. So let's rock and roll. Let's start from scratch here, guys. Again, the presentation part is going to be on program design. My goal is to make it simple. I try to make everything as simple as practical as possible, not complicated stuff. Even the things that seem a little more geeky, I'll dive into it and really try to make it as practical as possible. And after we do this, kind of like this baseline of the filter of how I write all programs, not just small group personal training ones, by the way, is all programs. This through this R7 system that is was created by Mike Robertson and Bill Hartman, two very, very genius guys, good friends of mine. And I just took it and ran with it. So I've started implementing it into a lot of different areas that most people do not. Things like team training, things like small group personal training. And then we're going to go flip this board around and look at a sample day and kind of build day 2 and 3 based on these principles so that you guys can kind of see how we do this. Okay, so first things first, right? We talk about the R7 model. All it means is like I'm looking at every single program, and every single program has to have this. Again, today specifically about small group personal training, but if I got a pro NFL athlete, I'm doing a filter of this. If I got our rugby team as a pro sports team, I'm looking at through this. If I have a complete beginner newbie that hasn't done training ever, I'm gonna still look at it through this. And I'll let you guys know about my little pie analogy. Again, I think this is just gonna be the principles of program design at the beginning before we dive into the specifics. But the 7 R's go like this, okay? R1 is release. All that release means is like releasing tissues. It's easy to understand, remember. So like when we have acronyms, it's easy for you to kind of have a framework to run through. But release just means soft tissue work. Whether that's foam rolling, whether it's lacrosse balls, battle stars. I mean, now there's so many, like our gym has just every little gadget for soft tissue work that you can imagine. I like body tempering, which is a little bit more aggressive. But again, what is it that you're going to do to get some of those tissues to tone down per se, right before you start the session? Again, this is something that in small group, we're not doing it with our clients. Remember, they come in and they do this beforehand, right? And for example, most of the sessions are full body sessions. So we do recommendations when we do our strategy sessions or orientation on what they should work on the most. So for most people, like for instance, lats, right? It's going to be hamstrings and quads like that. I would say lateral aspect of the quad, calves, right? Rolling out the stuff that tends to be for most people like wound up, okay? For some people that are here, right, we'll give them protocol to like just release their traps, with the AccuMobility ball on the rig. And we have this whole little sequence that they go through, move their neck, move their arms, and they just get that soft tissue release through that. Now, again, we won't go into, the people used to say that you break up trigger points. It's not really what happens, right? This is more of a neurological effect, but it doesn't matter. Like if somebody feels better, people still argue on the mechanism of what happens, but the reality is like if somebody does soft tissue work, most of the times they'll feel better. Like if they have a little bit of, nagging knee issues and they roll out glutes and hamstrings and calves and they do their, IT band a little bit and they do that pin and stretch technique for the quads, things are going to feel better. So we'll try to go like, hey, look, do this for 5 minutes by yourself. Okay. So that's what release is. Okay. Then we have reset. Okay. Now, for most people, reset is like, what the hell does that mean? Well, it's 2 things. One, if I put this little kind of like swing over here, right? And on one side of the swing is the sympathetic nervous system. Okay. And the other side is sympathetic. So think of this is fight or flight. This is rest and digest. Okay. Most people that come to see us are coming in from work. They're stressed out. If they come in the morning, a lot of times people are underslept. They didn't sleep good. So they're very likely going to be here in very fight or flight. So with the reset, because again, there's 2 things we want to do with the reset. One is kind of level out that autonomic nervous system, which is that, right? We want to get it from here, where they're very kind of fight or flightish, to here. We don't want them to calm down and be chill, completely take a nap. We want them to kind of level out, right? So one of the things that we like to do in a reset is breathing drills. Simple, very, very simple thing. Honestly, that's kind of like a recommendation that I would make for almost everybody, right? Like box breathing. So what is a box breathing? You can have different, I would say, timed box breathings. But box breathing is if I exhale through my mouth for 4 seconds, hold for 4, inhale through my nose for 4, hold for 4, and do it again, right? 4, 4, 4. That would be a 4, 4, 4 box breathing, right? That's going to get people to calm down, okay? It's going to bring them from here to a little bit more leveled out. Because when you're fight or flight and your nervous system's all like ramped up, you're also toned, right? That's why you'll see people that don't work out, right? They don't train, but they have the lat syndrome, right? They're like, what's up? You're like, did you just train? No, I just came from work, right? Because again, they're so high strung. So we're trying to just level them out a little bit. And again, this is a teaching tool because resets are like, let's say this takes 5, 7, 8 minutes, or maybe 10 if people want to have it. Like, I don't want to plug this into the hour that I have of training, but I want to teach it to everybody so that they do it. Okay. So this is part 1, okay, of what we want to do with the reset. Part 2 is we just want to get our joints in a good position. Okay. So for example, if I'm like sitting all day long and my hip flexors are tight and overactive, right? And so when I stand up, I'm here. Okay. What are some things that I could do just to put my joints in a better position, right? And I like to do like positional breathing. So think about the couch stretch, right? The couch stretch is like where you put this back leg up onto a chair or boo, 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 right? And you're getting that stretch here on the front side. Okay. So we do that and go overhead to get a little bit of that hip flexor. But instead of counting for time, I am now in this position, exhaling, inhaling. So I'm going 6 to 8 breaths so I'm releasing some of those tissues to get in a better joint position. Where folks that have, even for me, a lot of people lean to their right side. Why? Because their right lung is bigger, right? So they'll do this. I call it the LL Cool J. Right? You do the LL Cool J, and then what happens is this gets short and tight, right? And literally, if you guys do that, like for instance, this overhead reach stretch, you'll see on the left side versus the right side, you'll be a lot more restricted on one side. So what would we do? Like for me, I'm using myself as an example for a reset. I'll come in on a reset, get a TRX, grab it, cross my leg to get this IT band, right? And TFL, QL, the whole thing. I'll reach across, I'll exhale and push the hip over that side, right? So I'm opening this whole side up and I'm doing breathing drills. So exhale and then holding it just to get myself in better positions. Now, there's a lot of methods that we can use to do this, by the way, right? If anybody's heard of PRI, Posture Restoration Institute, DNS, you got FRC drills. There's a lot of things that we can use as methods to help you get into a better position, okay? The joint in a better position. Again, just breathing drills in and of itself can get a joint in a better position, right? So again, if I'm flared up and I'm exhaling and getting my ribs down, boom, I'm gonna have a better position of my neck, my rib cage, my whole shebang, right? So my point being is, the reason why I say this, because it's a good ROI, right? If somebody gets themselves calmed down in a more kind of neutral state, gets their joints in better position, and then we go into the rest of the stuff, yay, right? And if they can spend 5 to 7, 8 minutes doing that and you teach them the things to do, that's going to be great. Again, too far to dive into. Actually, I've done a bunch of videos on these things. It's on YouTube for free as well. I'll be doing more, right? Because it can get a little bit geeky, but I want to keep it real simple and give you some examples here. Okay. And listen, real quick, I put this thing up here because it's very important. So here's what we're going to talk about today and what I want your frame to be. Okay. This, because you see this in fitness a lot, right? 1, systems versus tools. You know, what's a tool? Barbell, trap bar deadlift, sandbag, kettlebell, dumbbell, water bag. I mean, I could go on and on and on, right? Like how many tools? Bands, sleds, but those are all tools, right? Great. We love tools. Tools are awesome, but tools are not systems. Okay. Because people are like, hey, can you give me a kettlebell workout? Can you give me this workout? Can you give me that workout? But it's like, we're trying to create a program that is progressive, that is based on principles, not methods, right? Methods are great. Remember I said that poem, I'm going to say it again. Methods are many, principles are few. Methods change, principles never do, right? So always remember that, because we want to build our programs off that. And also systems, so systems versus tools, and then systems versus randomization. Okay, and you'll find, I mean, I know I don't have to kind of bog this down, but I will. You have to have a progressive model, right? If you just have random workouts and people are working out and they're sweating, and look, those are all great things, but you're not giving them the best opportunity to develop, right? Because the way the body adapts is it has to be progressed. We'll talk a little bit more about, systems of progression. I know we talked about it in week 1 when I was explaining like how to operate the programs, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into that today. Okay, so I wanted to share this: systems versus tools, systems versus randomization, and principles over methods. Like, that's got to be our overarching theme. What is this? This is a system. Okay, it's a system to look at your programming through. So once we got these two, and people do, again, we teach them to do this that way, we go to readiness. Readiness is basically a great way to get ready for the training session. So that's your warm-up. Now, Alan Cosgrove called it, which I really like, I've used this interchangeably, but RAMP, right? And it's an acronym for range of motion, activation, and movement prep. Okay, that's what readiness is. And when we went into, even in week 1, when we were doing the training, I took you guys and broke down an example of a dynamic warm-up. Right? I always say, like, hey, when people come in, we're going to get them into some good positions, do some breathing, right? It's almost like more stretchy. And then from there, what are we going to do? Right? We're going to start progressing movements and combining movements. We're going to speed it up. And at the end, we're going to have movement prep. Because part of activation is also things like if we're doing fire hydrants, right? We're on the ground, we're doing a fire hydrant, we're getting some activation in the glutes. We're doing some core work, might be a plank with the reach. We're doing all these different things where we're improving our range of motion in our joints. We're activating, right? Whether it's, I mean, I know this is overblown, the word turn things on. Things are turned on, right? But we're activating certain muscles more. And then movement preparation, again, it's like high knee to lunge to instep, high knees, skips, lateral slides, right? We're cranking up the intensity to get the core temperature up, to get the nervous system going, to movement prep, okay? So again, these are interchangeable, right? Readiness means your warm-ups, your dynamic warm-ups. You're preparing the body to train. From there, we have reactive. That's all our speed, elasticity, power, right? Stuff. And here, I've talked about the importance of this, not just in the realm of people that want to be more athletic, but I would say that our average age in the small groups is probably somewhere between 30 to 40. Again, so there's some things that we want to talk about here when it comes to this. Now, power is the first thing that you lose. Elasticity is the first thing you lose. You lose it faster than you lose strength. You lose it faster than you lose muscle mass, right? All of those things. So you want to maintain it. So even if the goal is like getting leaner, dropping body fat, getting stronger, we want to be able to continue to develop and maintain those things. Now, one thing that's important that I wrote out here is this, okay? So people lose elasticity with age. There's a bunch of great research too. If you look at after the age of about 35, how the Achilles tendon, as an example, right, tends to get stiffer, drier, right? You can look it up, okay? Now, of course, there's ways to, I would say, slow that down and prevent that, just like losing muscle mass. You can prevent it by doing strength training and building muscle, right? But you do get loss of elasticity with age, which is why it's so important. Again, at that 35, this is just an Achilles, for example, that kind of speeds up, which is why we want to continue to do it, but to be smart with it, not overdo it, okay? So be aware of reps and volume, because I've seen this a lot where, I would say programs are like, yeah, we should do power training and elasticity and then all of a sudden, like these small group sessions turn into these plyometric sessions. And a lot of the tissues of these clients cannot handle it. and you see pull of the calves, pull of the hammies, even I've seen this, I've seen this with actually pretty developed athletes where Achilles are popping, right? You don't want to have that in any of your training. So here's just some good guidelines, okay? 30 to 60 contacts per week, okay? Can it be a little bit more or less? Yes, and it also depends what type. Here I also wrote different forces. So think of box jump versus depth jump, okay? Box jumps are way safer, right? We're going down, we're jumping up and landing, we're stepping off. We always teach people to step off. A lot of times you have to yell at people or coach them back because they just want to jump off, right? And a lot of folks aren't ready to be jumping off because jumping off ends up being a depth jump, right? Depth jump is where you would drop from a height and then explode up. The forces there are much bigger. Just like sprinting, right? We want to gradually progress sprinting. There's a lot of regressions and progressions that we can do. But if you got a person that's coming into class, they're 35, they used to be an athlete, but they haven't really done a lot since then. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, we're going to do 15, 20-yard sprints, right? And they're like motivated, and I'm like, hey, listen, you're going to be band resisted high knees. They're like, no, I'm good. Right? Like, and all of a sudden, we're sprint number 5. Yeah, right? And it's like they blame themselves because they pushed through it, but now maybe they don't come back, right? So we have to be smart about that programming of how much we put into that. So this is a good guideline for you. 30 to 60 contacts. What I mean by that, right? If you got box jumps and they do, in day 1, they're doing 4 to 5 sets of 4 box jumps, 5 box jumps, right? That's 20 contacts right there, right? And then day 2 of the program, they're doing a skip, a scoop toss, an explosive scoop toss. And they're doing 5 sets of 4 to 5 there, right? Then we're at 40 to 50, right? So, and then the last day, you might be doing some type of lunge jumps, right? You're going to be around that 60-point mark. So again, if you go a little over, if you go a little under, like no biggie, but this does give you a good, I would say, a good marker. Also, okay, good question. Julie said, what do you mean by contacts per week? 1 jump equals 1 contact, right? 1 rep, essentially. Okay, so think of it that way. And of course, the model of progression and regression allows us to, make it a little bit more challenging for somebody. So I'll give you an example. So let's say we have low hurdle hops, okay? And that beginner phase is jumping over the hurdle, stopping, and then jumping over the hurdle and stopping again, right? Where level 2 can be jumping over the hurdle, having an in-between hop, right? So you have so you jump over, in-between hop, jump over, in-between hop, right? Then you have the hardest one, which is just consecutively jumping over, right? And that's just a great, I would say, progression for somebody that's just starting off versus somebody that's like, oh man, I'm killing it. Great. Awesome. You can jump over elastically over each one. And at the end, we could even have, jump over low hurdles, jump onto a box jump at the end. That would just be an example, right? That would be an example. But keep that in mind because, again, that's important. And it's also why when you look at the program, you'll see different forces. It's not all plyometrics. Remember, sprinting or bounding or elastic jumping, right? Those are more stressful than things like a scoop toss where we're using a weighted ball, right? Or if we're doing a dumbbell squat jump and then resetting, okay? So again, just knowing, change the forces up. Don't do pure plyometrics in 3 of the programs in that week because you have to always have context of the population that you're training. Here's the deal. It's very easy to progress, right? If you got somebody remember, you only have a small percentage of people that are in that intermediate to advanced range of training, and those are easy to progress. That's really easy to do, right? But regressing is harder. You actually need more skill sets to regress than to progress. Okay, so I just want to give you guys that to keep in mind. Okay, so that's our readiness, and you guys know how we use this because in that program design, we usually contrast that, right? So Again, you'll see the program day one. When we do a trap bar deadlift, we're doing a broad jump, right? So we contrast the lower body strength with that lower body power and elasticity over there. From there, R5 is resistance. That's the simple one. That is strength training. But here's something that's important. Most people bundle this together. They'll say strength training. I actually like to break strength training down. Like, so there's strength training and there's resistance training. And you're going to be like, whoa, what do you mean? Well, here's the deal. Strength training, our main purpose is trying to get stronger, period, right? Trying to get stronger. Resistance training can have different implications. Are we trying to build muscle? Are we trying to maintain muscle? Are we trying to develop tendon strength? Maybe we're doing resistance training that's a little bit more catered to fat loss, right? Maybe we're doing resistance training for durability, bring up weak links, okay? Strength training, trying to get stronger. That's why also the small group personal training program design is that block one, it's all about getting stronger and it's all about developing speed and power, right? Mostly getting stronger. But people will say that like the same, but it's not all the same, right? Because the choice of exercises, if I want to try to create as much force as possible, is going to be different than if I'm trying to, for instance, do resistance training to build muscle, because now we have methods that are more time at attention, or maybe some intensification methods, drop sets, pre-fatigue sets, things of that nature. We're not going to be doing that here, right? Because our main goal is strength. So this is, and usually this is the biggest chunk of our programming, obviously, is R5. R6 is resilience. Notice, I mean, obviously the R's really help. Resilience is conditioning, okay? And one of the things I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do a full-blown kind of like workshop like this on just conditioning and how to implement it into programs, because we could definitely do a deep dive. But for the sake of this here, I really kind of break down conditioning into 3 types of conditioning. Again, this is principle-based. Development, maintenance, and recovery, right? So recovery, the way that we do recovery at our gym is like, we actually have that rebound class, right? So it's basically 2 classes a week that we do. You can come in to that class and we have a whole model. I actually did a YouTube video on it. How to do a rebound workout. Breaks the whole thing down, like literally step by step. And essentially, people will come in, do their breathing drills. We'll take them through mobility exercises for 15 to 20 minutes. We'll do everything from FRC stuff to like different methodologies. And then we do aerobic capacity work at like 130 to 40 beats per minute. All right, so people get a little bit of a sweat going for 20 to 30 minutes, usually 30, and then they're out of there and they feel great, right? It's a recovery workout. So we're not doing any of that. And again, we're not going to, I would say, use the time we have in a small group to do recovery, all right? That's out of there. We're either going to do development or maintenance, but really most of the time it's development. Now, because we only have so much time at the end of the small group session, we have to pick and choose, because development, we can do either power or capacity. You know what the easiest way to explain power capacity is? Power, how fast? Capacity, how long? Right? How fast and how long? And I've mentioned this before where, again, this is contextual, because if people go like, well, Luca, what is optimal? I say, look, the question should be is what is optimal for that hour that I have with the client? Okay? So most of the time, and you guys see this, we go for power. It's shorter bursts of energy, longer breaks, true high intensity training. But again, I'm going to give you guys some examples of conditioning that we plug in, and it'll give you a good idea. Remember, most people are going to do, the 3 small group personal training sessions, and then they'll come to like a couple of classes, team training at our gym. Team training, there, it's capacity. It's longer sessions. We're going to go 30 to 45 minutes of conditioning. It's going to be more capacity based. In small group, we got a short amount of time. We're going to go for power. right? So, and again, like I'll break this down in a separate all-in conditioning thing, because I'm a big fan of heart rate monitors. And if you don't, I would recommend that every client have a heart rate monitor. We have the Train with Morpheus system, which we have, a big screen where if somebody comes in with a heart rate monitor, we can put them up on a screen. It's not like MyZone, nothing against that, but it's definitely a higher level, right? Because it also integrates HRV and your personal heart rate zones, right? Again, definitely should check out Joel Jamieson stuff on that, because he's phenomenal at it. But again, I do believe that when it comes to conditioning, it can also elevate your game in the gym if you have everybody that's on a heart rate monitor. And imagine that in a conditioning session, you can tell somebody, hey, I want you to get to the red zone. I want you to get to the beginning of the red zone, and then I want you to recover to get to the top of the blue zone. And again, for everybody that's like, hold up, what's the red zone and blue zone? All it is like markers of heart rate, max heart rate. But the thing is, everybody's is different. So Susie Sue, 57 years old, right? She's gonna have to recover a lot. It's gonna take her longer to get to red, or maybe not, but then she's gonna have to recover way longer to get to the top of the blue, right? Somebody who's very conditioned, I'm gonna get to the red, 40 seconds later, boom, I'm already there, let's go. So that's customized conditioning, right? Because you can do fixed conditioning, 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off, but different people are going to recover in different ways. So I'm just letting you know that that's the next level. I'm not saying that you got to implement it. I'm just saying that like where we're moving, the more that we can individualize even group training, the better, not only the better results do we get, the more of an expert we are, the more we can kind of guide individually people, right? Because it's been very good to where we've had folks come in, they start doing their training, their heart rate gets to red really quick, and it just stays there, right? And then now we have this conversation, they're like, why is that happening? And I'm like, hey, look, like your aerobic base is really not good at all. So what we're going to do now, we're going to do a lot of aerobic based training. It's going to be a little bit more boring, but it's going to make you recover faster, sleep better, your stress levels are going to be lower, right? It gives us this ability to individualize and actually educate on where they are and what to do, even in a group setting. Because now I can tell this person like, hey, listen, if you have the ability, like every morning, get up, do 40 to 45 minutes of zone 2, right? And it's going to really help you with this. And now they do that, okay? So that's just a little asterisk in there that I think is very, very helpful, okay? But most of the time, again, look, we want to progress. We're going to talk about this kind of progression model. We want to progress everything that we're doing because that's how people adapt, okay? And then we have recovery, and we talked about recovery. Most of the time, we won't have time for it, but it just goes back to what we talked about, the resets. Recovery is like, hey, go do some light foam rolling, do some long stretching. You know, people have tight feet, Achilles tendons, calves. Hey, go on a slant board, hang out on a slant board for 1.5 minutes per single leg, breathe, do those long static stretches. Cool, go on a bike, calm down, like do super slow cardio for 10 minutes, right? We're bringing in, remember, because when you train, what happens when you train? Well, it's this, right? It's fight or flight. You lift heavy weights, you go hard in the paint, you do hard conditioning, right? So what are we trying to do in the recovery phase? Well, we're trying to get them back to this, or even better, we're trying to get them to this as soon as possible, right? And an example of this would be, and this is what a big mistake happens. I literally was just in a gym where I'm seeing a group train, and it's like, yeah, you know, everybody's tired. I see them pack their stuff up, walk out of the gym, sit into a metal can, which is their car, and then drive off, right, into traffic. So now, you know, they ended their session here, fight or flight, no recovery, like no calming down, right? Because remember, the moment your body starts to rebuild per se is when we can get it into that recovery state, right? So if you're packing your stuff up, walking out the door, high heart rate, sit in a tin can, flexed position, turn out, traffic, like, you know, pissed off, boom, we're right back here. We're not recovering. We're not bringing our body into a state of recovery. So spending 5 minutes here, 6, I'll even tell people like, hey, go for a walk. Go for like 5-minute walk, breathe, calm down, just before you sit in your car, right? So it's an important thing, but we may not be able to fit that, right? So for us, I know that readiness through resilience, that is the program, okay? Now, let's scoot over here, and we're going to come back to this. This is just talking about patterns, because once I flip this on the other side and start going into program design, we want to know, like, what are our main patterns? And some people are kind of like argue over this. Is there more? Is there less? But we've got our squat. We have a lunge. We have a hinge, right? But I also put thrusts under the hinge. Like, who's not doing hip thrusts these days? Right? So we'll put thrust under hinge. Then we got our push, our pull. We got carries, like, so any type of loaded carry. Single leg stance. So remember, a lunge, right, is to me, forward lunge, reverse lunge, every variation of a lunge. Single leg stance is your single leg RDL. Sometimes even, a Bulgarian split squat is kind of semi-supported, right? So that's where I'll do single leg stance, where I also will categorize as level change. To me, that's a step up, right? A step up is not a lunge, but it'll be like a single leg stance level change, right? And then we have locomotion and twist. All right, we don't do a ton of twist, but locomotion would be things like sled pushes, pulls, right? Even like crawls that are loaded and things of that nature, right? Again, some of these patterns are trained more often. Some of them don't have to be trained as often, but we're still including them in some form of another. Some of these, like for instance, locomotion, twist, carry, may find themselves in conditioning, right? Meaning, let's say if we're doing locomotion and we're doing 20 seconds on of fast crawls, we're doing twists with a med ball for speed, right? These side to side Russian twists, loaded carries, things of that nature, right? So again, they're going to be put in there, and I'm going to flip flop these sometimes back and forth here, so that when we program on the other side, you'll actually see how we put this together. All right, I'm going to take a quick sip. My C4. I feel like I'm behind on caffeine, but I'm not. While I flip this around, okay? All right, I only put up essentially one day today because I wanted to be able to just write day 2, day 3, pretty much live. And I'm going to grab one of these just in case when I need it. All right. So it's like Martha Stewart's cooking show or something, like, here's one I baked earlier. Right. And again, we know the block 1, block 2, block 3 model, but let's dive deeper based on, what we were talking about on the other side. Because remember, R3, or should I say R4 and R5, which is our reactivity and our strength part. Because remember, we said resistance, there's strength training and there's resistance training. So the strength training, so R4 and R5, that is our block 1. So we know, okay, most of the time, like that 1 to 6 rep range is kind of like where we develop strength. I mean, look, can you get stronger doing 8, 10, 12? Of course. Any type of resistance training is going to help you get stronger, especially when you're a beginner, right? So that's why let's just touch on this for a second. If you got somebody that comes into your gym and it doesn't, like, they're just doing progressive type of strength training, 10 reps, 8 reps, 12, it doesn't matter, but they consistently come for the whole year. You're going to do more for them than if you're like, hey, do these 4, we're going to lift for 4 reps heavier, but they're on and off. This is important. I think this is important to understand, and why the last, I would say, live training session that I did about world-class, the DNA of a world-class group training session, and all the follow-up and connecting with people is so important, because if you get people to continue to come, even if you get the rep ranges wrong, there is no wrong, right? You're still going to get them the best results possible because they continue to come. So I think this is a very important subject. But remember that here, we're just trying to develop 2 things, right? Strength and then rate of force production. So meaning elasticity, how fast our tendons react, right? Because whether it's doing low hurdle hops, pogo jumps, right? High knees, box jumps, skater jumps, right? So the elasticity part, or things like power, my bad, box jumps, we're more on the power side, dumbbell squat jumps, trap bar deadlift jumps, scoop toss throws, jumping lunges, right? We got so many different things that we can plug in here. That's why I say power and elasticity. And remember, there's that curve, right? I'll erase that. So think about, this is force, this is speed, right? Force velocity curve, right? Velocity. So this is sprints, because that's like pure speed, right? This is your 1 RM, or like a 2-3 rep, right? Where you're just like grinding it out, like, ugh. But in between there, we have a lot of different things. We have strength, speed. So think about strength speed is like 50 to 75% of your 1 RM, but it's just trying to move it as fast as possible, right? That's important, right? Then you have your speed strength. Then you have your power, right? Which is like that 10 to 30% of your max load. But think about, here we're talking about med ball throws, which I love. Med ball throws are so like rotational throws for upper body or lower, or scoop tosses, or there's all types of throws that you can do that are super safe. That's why I love using those in classes, by the way, right? And people like, they smash shit, they get their stress out. It's great. But we can develop, so that power elasticity, we're changing this up, like we're using different exercises. Sometimes we're doing pure speed stuff, and that might be a sprint, or it might be all out high knees, right? Or it might be pogo jumps or bounds. And again, like these can be progressed and regressed. But sometimes we're going to go like a little heavier, like a trap bar deadlift jump, which is perfectly safe when done right and taught right, by the way, right? Sometimes people will go like, oh my God, that's unsafe. Like when you go and play, when you're a weekend warrior and you go play a basketball game and jump, that's way more, I would say, unsafe than a controlled trap bar deadlift jump at a gym, right? So, but again, we're going to use different exercises in that continuum throughout our programming. So it doesn't have to just be one thing all the time. And like I said, you have to be careful about too much of exposure of really high intensity things for your tendons. As an example, right, doing things like plyometrics, 3 days a week in every program. No, like I may do one day where it is something like, one day it's skater jumps, but then another day it's scoop tosses, right? So it's not as much kind of stress on the tendon. And then another day, it's going to be something like all out high knees, or maybe a sprint for people that can do it, right? Which is a lot of stress on the tendons, by the way, right? So again, making sure you're mixing that up, almost like a high, medium, low, right? I think that's a very, very important concept here as it is. So if we go back here to block 1 now, okay? Think about, again, 1 through to 6, but we're not really going to do 1 RMs, right? In training, I dislike doing all out 1 RMs just because, first of all, most people that are untrained, they don't really know where that is for them, and they can kind of push past and with bad form. For people who are decently trained, still 1 RMs, the risk to benefit ratio is a little off for me, because things can get competitive, right? So you have people that understand their body well, they know what it means to have a couple reps in the tank, or if they're close to that max, and there's people that don't, and the people that don't can then, injure themselves, right? So that's why we keep it more in that 2 to 6 rep range. But think about this. If this was a program of month 1 and we have trap bar deadlift for 3 reps, right? And then we got broad jump for 5, and then we have a floor press for instance, for 3. Okay. That keeps us in that high intensity being percentage of your max weight, working on strength, right? Not resistance training, and is block 1. Okay. But here's the thing. In block 1, our goal is to constantly progress the weight. This is a thing I mentioned in week 1 when we were talking about execution of the programs. But as we get to week 4, remember, I'm okay with somebody lifting more weight and they can only get, week 4, they can only get 2 reps, but they bump the weight up. That's fine, right? We up the intensity, we lower the volume because 2 reps is less than 3 reps. So just know that like in this model, like that is okay. Because I want you to think about what the main goal is. It's helping people create more force. Okay, not time and attention here, but more force specifically. So we're going to basically progress that. Now, if you're asking, like, okay, let's say month 1, we're working 3-5-3. But month 2, what would you do then? Well, I would pick a different rep range that still fits that mold. So that could be 6 reps. It could be 4. But then it could also be, if you guys know Jim Wendler's 5-3-1, where, for instance, week 1 could be 5 reps. Week 2 could be 3 reps. Week 3 would be a feet 5-3-1. Now, the cool thing about this is you can use any type of, I would say, method that fits this. We could do a 6-4-2. If you guys know what rest pause training is, like rest pause training is, for example, where this is how I would write this out. 1 + 1 + 1. All right, so you take a weight that you could lift 2 times, okay, safely, and then you'd lift it for 1 rep, and then you'd rest for 10 to 15 seconds. So basically, you're just like 10, 9, 8, comes back to 1. You do 1 more rep. Boom, put it back down, rest, 10, 9, right? And then you do another one. So it's a cluster set of 3 reps. But because you have those mini breaks in between, you're able to lift 3 reps of a weight that usually you could do for 2. But you can do it safely because you got that mini break in between, right? So that is a high intensity method that fits strength training. You could do 2 + 2 + 2, 2 + 1 + 1. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. So now you can see that how many months of training could we have when we look at different methods, right? We did month 1, 3 reps. Then we go month 2, 6 reps. Then we go month 3, 5-3-1. Because the 4th month, you can then just go pure 2, like for instance, a really, really heavy 2, or you can start it again, right? So we got like 6 months right here, and then we can flip it around and do. So this is a year worth of programming just like that. And I'm not even getting, I would say, granular with it and going into deeper ideas here. Do you see what I'm doing? Okay. The other thing that I think is important conversation, I'm just letting you know what I've been doing more of because it just works. Okay. So let's say I got my month 1 program as a trap bar deadlift. And I was doing 3 reps on the trap bar deadlift. Month 2, I'm going to do elevated trap bar deadlift. And I'm going to change the rep range. And let's say it's going to go to a double, right? It's going to go to a 2-repper. And then month 3, I would go step on something and, for instance, pull it. Meaning it's the same pattern for maybe even 3 months. The reason why is because people progress really well. I think that too many coaches change the exercises way too fast. Way too fast. Because here's the thing, I had it written somewhere. Oh, there it is, right? Look, you know what our goal is? Get to a plateau. Okay? When people get to a plateau, they're like, oh my God, I got to a plateau. No, that's good. That's good. That means that you've been challenging yourself and your body's been adapting, and now it's become harder, and now we got to switch it up. A lot of coaches will change things up before there's a plateau. So they don't squeeze out the most that they can out of a movement pattern and a method. That's why we might go a full 12 weeks where day 1 of the program is trap bar deadlift. And then, for instance, week 2 might be elevated trap bar deadlift. Sorry, month 2 might be elevated trap bar deadlift. Month 3 may be trap bar deadlift with chains, right? Because now we have again, that top is loaded more than the bottom. Those are all same pattern, different kind of, a little bit of different loading patterns. We change the rep scheme, but all the reps would be in that 2 to 6 rep range using these intensification methods. And again, and the thing is, the lower body was same thing. Barbell floor press would follow suit, right? I keep it simple, and I'll keep the upper body exercise usually with the same rep ranges as the lower body one. Again, this is a lot of trial and error to find the model that like has just really worked well. Okay, because again, if we take this barbell floor press, let's say that's month 1, great. Month 2, incline barbell bench press. Month 3, flat barbell bench press. Right, very similar patterns, and we're just changing those rep ranges. So, one of the things that I think is very, very helpful for you to do for yourself is, when we had those patterns on the other side, I'm not even going to flip it. So we had a hinge, we had push, we had squat. Write out all the different variations of that would fit strength. Okay. So for example, if I was going to say squat, okay, what are my squat? Okay, I can have barbell back squat. I can have safety bar back squat. I can have barbell front squat. I can have box squat. I can have belt squat. I can have double KB squat. I can have pistol squat to box, right? Because we can load the hell out of that. We do it quite a bit, actually. You've seen Mike Ball do that, where they're loading that pistol to a box, right? Or a floating lunge, right? Even though it's a single leg one, doesn't matter. So you'd go down this kind of list of squat variations where you can apply a whole lot of force, okay? By the way, one of the things that like I also use here that I didn't mention is this. We will use overcoming isometrics in this phase 2. So remember, overcoming isometrics are things like where I'm trying to move an immovable object. So imagine that I'm under the pins with just an empty bar. I go under the pins with a squat, and I start pushing like crazy for 5 seconds into that bar, and I can't move it, and I come back out, and I rest for 5 seconds. Shake it off. All right, coming back under it. Right, another 5 seconds. We'll do 3 sets of 5 seconds as 1 rep. Right, because the same thing, we're creating a lot of force. Very safe way to do it. So it's something that, again, that we can rotate into this block right here. Okay. So again, this is very, very beneficial because you should have this kind of like exercise not list/library, because it's so easy to plug and play. And by the way, you know how I just mentioned trap bar deadlift? Okay, I would legitimately list it like this. Regular deadlift off the floor. Regular deadlift off of blocks. Okay. Elevated deadlift, meaning that you're standing on a plate trying to go. For a lot of people, that won't be a good fit. Then you got deadlift with bands. Then you got RDL. Then you got RDL that's banded RDL. RDL with chains. Okay. If you have things like a belt squat machine, which we do, we can do a belt squat RDL, which is crazy safe, right? You can have a staggered RDL, like a kickstand. So you go down the list because you want to be able to be like, this fits, this fits, this fits, this fits. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go. Same thing with your power exercises. Lower body power exercises all the way through the continuum. Because you're probably going to have a nice like 15 to 20 that you consistently use, right? But write out 40. I can come out with 40 right now, guys, right? But my point being is like spend that time, because when you do that, it's really it's going to make this so simple that we could sit here and in 20 minutes, I'll write 6 months worth of programs or more in this model, right? I want that for you guys, because I want you to be effective and efficient, but also make them be great, right? Smart, great, fun, but more than anything, like get people results. Okay. So that is our block 1 modality thought process. Again, if we have any questions at the end, I'll certainly answer them. Okay. Because in part 2, we're going into muscle building. Okay. because I want to go over day one and then go back and kind of create an example of day two. So you guys can see me just write it up. Okay. So block 2, this is the resistance. Remember, this is strength training. This is resistance training. What are the things that we want to do in block 2? Well, I label it as muscle building because muscle building, people can understand what it is, right? But the things that we do here, we use supplemental exercises and accessory exercises. And I like to think a lot of times about, like, I'm going to use exercises that build the main exercise. And then I'm going to use accessory exercises to work on the weak links that people have, right? So in powerlifting, you know, you'd basically have supplemental exercises to your main lift. So the deadlift, right? So what's a supplemental exercise to the deadlift? A good morning, for example, right? What's an accessory exercise? Well, it's a reverse hyper, it's a glute ham raise, it's a RDL. Like, what are the weak links that we got to bring up? Now, with general population, we're not necessarily, you know, trying to bring their powerlifting deadlift up, but I do want to bring for instance, I want to bring the trap bar up for a number of reasons. One, I want them to get strong. If they see getting stronger, that's progress. That's a huge win. But also, I want to work on things that most people need to work on, right? We want to work on all the movement patterns because those are important. But where are we living right now? Right? So usually hamstrings, ass cheeks, not as strong, not as developed, right? So for the health of your low back, for the health of your posture, we're going to work on that more. What about upper back, right? If we're here, right? We want to do more horizontal pulling. We want to do more upper back work, face pulls, band pull aparts. Core is usually weak, right? And not in good positions. So these are all things that we want to work on in this block. We want to work on supplemental and accessory exercises that develop the main lift, that help people, I would say, live better lives and get the bodies that they want. And this is all done in block 2 with density work, which we already talked about. Okay. Now, think about this when we looked at the movement patterns, right? When we look at this day 1, well, we have a hinge right here, and then we have a horizontal push right here. Okay. Then we have, this is kind of, let's call it a lunge, even though this is a single leg unsupported, if you think about it. Then we have a horizontal pull, and then we have a core with another pull. It's a scapular retraction, really. But remember, I try to, throughout the week, do more pulling than pushing, okay? Especially horizontal pulling. You'll notice that in the program, there's less vertical pulling, right? Because people are already here. Not to say vertical pulling is bad. We want to have it, but we want to have more horizontal pulling, right? So it takes, if we flip around, which we will eventually, and we look at those movement patterns, right? We now see, okay, we're ticking those boxes. And we know from the science that working multiple, having at least 2 exposures to a movement pattern throughout the week is helpful, is better to develop strength and build muscle, meaning we should deadlift more than once a week. But in another day of the week, instead of it being the main big exercise, it's probably going to show up as a RDL, a dumbbell RDL over there, okay? So that's a perfect example, right? We want to tick those boxes, but we want to make sure we include more of the things that we want to build up. So again, if I got 3 pushes and 1 pull, but we're already living here, that doesn't make sense in my program design, right? Well, I mean, one of the things is obviously also form, because if you do proper form on things, it tends to fix, I would say, a lot of crappy posture as well. Okay. So, and remember block 2, because this question that I get quite a bit, how do you decide the rep ranges on block 2? Well, I'm a fan of, in this block, doing undulating. It's just a geeky word to mean like constantly like rotating. So I actually put it up right here. Remember, when we do density training, we don't go to failure, right? We stay about four-ish reps away from failure. Now, most people won't know what that is. When you get a beginner, they don't know what reps in reserve means. So you guys know what it means. RIR means reps in reserve. Reps in reserve means I could do 4 more reps in that lift. Okay. For people that haven't been lifting for a long time, they really don't have a good gauge of that. And let me tell you a funny example. Right? This is one of the many true stories like this. I say, all right, go do as many reps as you can, right? And they start going, and then they stop at the top of the bench. I'm like, do 2 more. Okay, cool. Do 2 more. All right, do 2 more. And like they'll get 10 more, 12 more because I challenged them. But to them, they were like, oh, this is the last one I can do. And they were able to do 12 more. So beginners don't have a good gauge of what reps in reserve is. But here's the cool part about it. Through studies, we know that for a beginner, even 50% of their 1RM, right, can induce strength and muscle building gains, which means that even if they're off, it doesn't matter as long as we progress it as we talked about. Okay, so here's one of the ways that I think, and it's been very successful for us in the way that I program, is undulate the reps. So let's say in month 1, I'm going to use 15 reps, even though that's pretty high, but we'll go to 15. So Bulgarian split squat, 15 per side. 1-arm cable row, 15 per side. Hollow hold with band pull apart, 15. Okay. And then week to week, what do we say? We either do 1 or 2 things. We add a rep, or we take a little bit more load, right? For most people, what works better so they don't have to think about it, because remember, we might have groups of 16. I'm like, just add a rep, so it'll be 16, 17, so forth. Or the other thing that we can do, remember, there's different methods. Could I do in week 2, 15, but then just have them pause a little bit? So instead of doing regular 15 reps, I go, hey, week 2, guys, we go 15, 1 second ISO. 15, 1 second ISO. That means week 2 is harder than week 1, and we're progressing time and attention. Remember, so there's a lot of ways to progress this, okay? But the key here is I'm going to progress them in this block 2 to where they're going to do more volume in the same amount of time, right? Because when we think about how do we get results, we can increase frequency, intensity, right? Intensity is usually load. We can increase density. So if we hit the muscle more frequently, we're going to get better results. Obviously, here we can't do that because we have a locked in 3 days a week of training. Unless somebody's coming 2 days a week and you go like, hey, come to the 3rd day, they're going to progress. Load is every week, lift a little bit more weight, right? Density, we're getting more work done in the same amount of time, or the same amount of work done in less time. Both of those work, right? So that is our block 2. That's our whole premise. We talked about it even in like the first live, talking about how to progress this. Now, here's the thing, month 2. So we went 15 reps, month 1. Month 2, 12. Month 3, 10. Month 4, 8. That's linear, right? Linear means that we're increasing load here and dropping the reps. But then we go month 5, 12. Month 6, 8. Month 7, 10. Month 8, for instance, 6. You see what I'm doing here? So like literally I just gave you a year worth of that, I would say block 2 rep ranges, 8, 12, 6, 10. So 15, 12, 10, 8, 12, 8, 10, 6, 8, 12, 6, 10. That's undulating, right? Where we're switching it up. Okay. And again, this allows us to constantly progress. We're also going to switch up the exercises. But remember, we would do very, very well. And in a lot of my programs, you'll see this. So in month 2, so let's say it was Bulgarian split squat, 15 reps, 1-arm cable row, 15 reps, hollow hold with band pull apart, 15 reps. Okay. Month 2, dumbbell reverse lunge, 12 reps. 1-arm dumbbell row, 12 reps. Hollow hold with KB pullover, 12 reps. Okay. Then we could go to month 3. We could go dumbbell walking lunge, 10 reps. We could go landmine meadows row, 10 reps. We could go plank hold with band pull, 10 reps per side. Bam, there you go. It's a quarter of programming done. And if you follow the model, more weight, get stronger, move more explosively, add volume to do more density in the same amount of time. Like, we just wrote a program right there, and it's going to work. And it's not just going to work, guys. It's going to work exceptionally well. And the people that are doing it are going to get very, very strong, right? And they're going to get development. Again, because we've been doing it this way, what's so cool is that, like, we'll get people that have been doing personal training a lot of times, and they've been doing it tools over systems and randomization over systems. Like, remember what we said at the beginning? So they're just working out. And then in like 4 months, they're like, oh my God, I've been training for like 2 years. And in 4 months, this is the most weight I've lifted. Because I'm also like, wait, hold up. You did that last week. Bump it up. It's looking good. It's looking good. I got you. Coach them up. Lift more weight. Wow, that was easy. Right? And now they're progressing because they're following a systems model, a periodization model, not a randomization model. Okay? So moving through, because again, we'll go into at least building another day of this so you guys can see it. Okay? And then we go to block 3, conditioning. I wrote this here because I think it's really, really important. Fun and experience. I remember in the week 2 training, we talked about the power of moments and how it's so powerful to end on a high, right? Now, again, I think about what people want and the thing that they say that they want, right? If I have somebody that goes, hey, I want to get rid of this flab right here, right? And they're like doing their tricep little thingy, right? Now, do we know, is there such a thing as fat loss spot reduction? We know that's not really real. But if that person, we have a density block, we have a metabolic stress block where they're doing tricep snap downs with a band, right? And then band shoulder raises and band curls, and they're feeling their tricep burn. What's happening there is they go like, oh my God, this is working. It's working, right? So we know the science of it. But the kicker is that the client is going like, hey, they're listening to me, man. Like they get it. They get it. And of course, if they continue to train and they get their nutrition on point and they get their recovery on point, like they're going to see the result that they want. But it's the same thing for like glute finishers, right? Where it's like, hey, I want to build my butt up. Okay, cool. Yesterday's small group was a perfect example of this. Block 3 was 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off. It was single leg hip thrusts, lateral band walks, and bowler squats, right? And ass cheeks are burning, right? And everybody's like giving me the finger, but they're also like very happy, right? It's a weird dichotomy, I know. But my point is like, so I'm including this in my mindset around, right? Because this is either conditioning or it's metabolic stress. And I like to rotate these. So it's like one program will have 2 conditioning days, 1 metabolic stress day. The next 4-week block will have 2 metabolic stress days, 1 conditioning day, right? You can play around with these things based also on your audience and based on what the rest of your, I would say, programming in gym is like. For instance, we have team training sessions, which is pretty much all conditioning, different conditioning modalities, right? Which means that like in my small groups, I can either plug in the types of conditioning that we won't. Remember, we talked about power versus capacity. So more power work, okay? And metabolic stress. So that's how I program it. And this has been, again, this is many years of trial and error to get to this, to be like, no, I'm telling you, this stuff works. But I gave you an example here of an EMOM, okay? Which is every minute on a minute. And we talked about weak link training or what people feel. Okay, cool. So here we put swings and then push up knee to elbow. Let me just give you reason. Like I'm trying to give you context behind everything when writing programs. My kind of rule is that like for every closed chain movement, like so think or I say open chain movement, meaning if I have a bench press or a dumbbell bench press where my scapula, my shoulder blades are locked, I should have one movement where my shoulder blades are free, right? That could be a landmine press, right? It could be a push-up, okay? It could be a cable press, like where my scapula moves, because To have a healthy shoulder, you got to have healthy scapula. So bam, I'm going to put this in conditioning. And now we got kettlebell swings. We're working hamstrings, glutes, but it's more power based. So minute 1, hey, I want you to get 15 swings. For most people, 15 swings are going to take them about 20 seconds-ish. Now they got, and I'm like, hey, rest or active recovery? Active recovery, they're just moving around. Okay, minute 2, push up, knee to elbow. So they're doing a push up, driving that knee to elbow, pausing for a second, boom, back down. Push up, knee to elbow. Okay, we're going to do 12 of those. That's going to take them 25 seconds for most people, if they're nice and controlled. 35-second break, boom, they're back to swings, right? In week 1, we might do 8, week 2, 9, 10, 11. Just super simple progressive model, right? But that's going to be conditioning, trust, right? More power output. We talked about power, short and hard with a little bit longer breaks, okay? So again, I'm going to flip-flop this because now I'm literally going to delete each one of these and rewrite another day. And hopefully we have time to do both days and do Q&A. We're only on time. Oh, we're good, guys. We're good. We're good. All right. So let's delete this. If that was day A, right, this would be day 2/day B. And you saw that we had, what do we have? We had a hinge, right? We had a trap bar deadlift, which is a hinge. And then we had a horizontal press. There's always going to be one day then that's going to be kind of the opposite of that, which is going to be a squat and a horizontal pull. So in this case, or it could be a vertical pull too, but in this case, let's choose a double KB squat. Okay. Now, here's the deal. If we went for, like, I'm not going to do, you could do it, but double kettlebell squats for 6 is a better rep range than the 3 or 4 in that one. Okay. Again, the exercise you choose, you still want to have, like, for instance, would you do a 1 rep or a 2 rep double kettlebell squat? Probably not the best option, right? But 6, you can go pretty damn hard and heavy on this, right? Again, the other thing that I've talked about before is that, like, if I'm doing a trap bar deadlift for 3, that's like hard on the nervous system. I tend to go like heavy, medium throughout the week, right? If I went and did a back squat on day 2, like a safety squat box squat for like 4 or 5 reps, really heavy, that's 2 really hard days, right? 2 really CNS intensive lifts as the main lift. I'm telling you from experience, by the way, of doing this, when we did this, people get buried, okay? What I mean by that is by the end of like a 4-week program, they're like smoked, okay? And then they go into the next program. They can't recover from that. So you have to keep in mind who your population is, who you're training, what is like enough stimulus, right? If you guys have heard of like stimulate, don't annihilate. So we want to push people, but a heavy double kettlebell squat is going to be challenging. Anybody that's never done like a heavy double KB squat for 6 to 8 reps, you're like, oh, man, I want to take a nap. But is the load, the actual load, meaning the weight of 2 KBs for 6 will never be as close to the load that you can get for a back squat or even a front squat, right? So we're definitely challenging strength, okay? But we're taking it a little bit easier on the nervous system. So, great example here. Then, let's say this day we do a single leg box jump. I'm going to do 4 per side. Okay? And then we're going to be able to go dumbbell, chest supported row. I mean, I didn't have this prepared earlier like Martha Stewart, but going off the top of my head here, right? So chest supported row for 6 with a pause, right? So now we got a squat, we got our power, single leg box jump. And remember, these can be very, like, we've had folks where we have the 3-inch, we have literally the 3-inch pad, and a new person, a lady that's, maybe in her 40s, and she's going, oh, that's it. That's challenge. That's power for her. Okay. So we can manipulate this a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes we'll even do things like just have them drop, be on a single leg, be like, hey, all I want you to do is drop down and catch yourself. Okay, cool. That's it. Right? Those are big forces for somebody that hasn't done anything like that. So know that, or for instance, what they can do here is also that this is a regression, is slam, go a staggered stance, slam a jambo hard, and then just catch yourself on one leg, right? They're training deceleration. There's going to be a lot of forces there to counter. That's going to be hard for them, okay? Again, know your regression model, know your progression model, right? But more importantly, know your regression model. Your regression model is more important. And then we got heavy dumbbell chest supported row. If you got T-bars, I do have some T-bars, right? So we got a T-bar row, we can use that one. But for most people, chest supported row, super heavy, 1,001 pause, control down, right? We're strength training. Every week we're going heavier. Boom, okay? So again, if we tick the boxes, let's look at day one. On day one, we had a hinge, we had a horizontal push. Now we have a squat and we have a horizontal pull. Nice, right? And then remember, we had a single leg unsupported on, I would say, on day one. And then we had a horizontal row. And then we had another scap retraction. Okay, cool. Well, here, now we can go dumbbell RDL. For instance, we could do a half kneeling cable press. And the thing is, imagine how many different things you can plug in here. But we talked about having that scapula move. So I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to do a controlled half kneeling cable press. And then let's go side plank with band rope. And I promise you guys, I'm doing this all at the top of my head. But it's like, and it's still it still has to make sense when we plug in those movements. Because remember how I talked about, like, I'm going to have more pulling than pushing? Great. Well, we have a pull here. This is a lower intensity one, but we got core and a pull here. We have a push here, and we have another hinge here. And this one, guess what? The scapula moves again. Great. Right? So we're knocking that out of ballpark. All right. If we want to train power here, what are we do with training power here? Let's go 15-45. And we're going to cover that locomotion, and we're going to do prowler sprints. Now, we'll start with 5. We have enough prowlers. You do have to think about equipment. Like, we have, like, we could do 4 sleds at the same time, which means if you're going to do a 1-to-4 work rest ratio, essentially, right, you can have 16 people going on a minute every minute, essentially, right? So you got to know that part of it. But 15 seconds of prowler, anybody push 15 seconds of prowler all out? How pleasant is that? Yeah, you already know, right? So we do 5 rounds, and then we just add a round a week. It's very, very simple. Again, here we could go with the same model that we talked about. Everything 15 reps. Month 1, we switch the reps up. Month 2, as we switch the patterns. See what we're doing here? Now, what would day 3 be? So this is just my personal preference. Could you do it other ways? Absolutely. Look, there's many ways to skin a cat. There's many ways, like, there's a lot of stuff that you could do here. And I'll talk about some variations of what I used to do in the past that you could mish and mash this with. But we had a hinge, we had a squat. My day 3 is always going to be a single leg. Okay. So I'm going to go heavy. So if I go now day 3, I'm going to go single leg. Put it this way, I can really push it. Is way more joint friendly, meaning, like, especially on the low back, but I can still develop strength. Because, I talked about Alan about this a lot. Like, what is strong? Answer that question, right? Like, strength is a lot, is the guy that, like, can snatch 500 or 400 pounds overhead strong. Hell yeah. What about the guy that can squat 1,000 pounds? Hell yeah. What about the person that can do an offset, like 72-pound kettlebell squat, pistol squat? Hell yeah. What about the person that can, like, grab you in jiu-jitsu and, like, you can't let go because it feels like a robot's grabbing you? all those are strong, right? So I think that there's too much of this stuck in like strong is just if I can get these 3 lifts numbers up, that's strong, right? Not true. A lot of my personal philosophy is like, certain things that are too high on a risk scale for me personally, single leg training, I'm 41 going on 42. I've hit some of my like PRs, lifetime PRs. I can put up crazy numbers and do that and feel good. My joints don't feel beat up. I keep getting stronger. And so single leg work is even though everybody uses it, it's still very, very underrated, right? So for instance, day 3, my main lift may be Bulgarian split squat, right? Now, you already saw it in this program. It may be safety squat bar. So safety bar, Bulgarian split squat. And we do these, they're like almost half fields, right? Put the safety squat bar on your back. We put the foot back and we keep our hands on the rig or on basically the safety bars that come out. So basically I can control at the bottom a little bit more. And we're loading the hell out of it, right? And that might be 5 per side on this, right? Okay, cool. What are we gonna do? And we can do a power skip as our, so remember power skip is we'll go 40 yards where you jump up as high as you can, you land down, boom, other side, almost like doing a layup in basketball, as high as possible. And then here, let's do let's do a pike pull-up, right? I have nothing against pull-ups. We do them, we do chin-ups, we do pull-ups, we do them heavy. But for a lot of folks, keeping the butt on the ground, instead of having this overhead position, because a lot of people can't get overhead, they're basically doing this pull-up from here. So you can do it with the barbell, you can do it with TRXs, and you can load the hell out of it too. So let's say we do this for 5-2. We're gonna go heavy, right? We're gonna go heavy. We go to part 2. Here, we might do something like a single leg hip thrust, because who doesn't want to work booty? And now we might want to go on a push, okay? But remember, we didn't go overhead yet. All right, let's do a little better version of this and go landmine press. All right, it's a little more shoulder friendly for people that can't go overhead. And here, remember how I said I want to add more, basically some more glute work for most people. So we might do valve slide, hamstring curls. Okay. Again, if you went and checked the boxes of movement patterns, we're hitting all the boxes and we're hitting the boxes that we want to twice. Upper back work, glutes and hammies, right? But on our main lifts, I tend to like to do basically a hinge push, a hinge and a horizontal push, a squat and a horizontal pull, and then doing a single leg movement with a vertical pull. And I would count pike pull-ups as a vertical pull, right? There's a lot of other things that you can do there, by the way, and plug it in. And then on a conditioning block, for example, when I do these Russian twists, by the way, it's almost anti-rotation. So med ball, instead of twisting, we're basically doing really, really, really fast, like in a seated position, we're moving the ball side to side as fast as possible. So let's say we went 12 seconds or 12 seconds on and then almost, 48 off, right? So 1 of 4 here. By the way, doing that for 12 seconds all out, you're smoked, right? So we're going to do those Russian twists. And then we're going to go med ball or Dynaball, wall throws, just one side. And for instance, skater jumps. Right? So now we're doing some of that anti-rotation. We are actually training rotation with these. Pa! Pa! Because in like 12 seconds, you probably get 6, 7, 8 throws really explosively. And you go both sides and then you go skater jumps. And we run through that 2 rounds, would take us to about 8 minutes. Right? Again, we talk, how we talked about power capacity. We're focusing on that. Or again, what could I also do? I could go to metabolic stress route here and do a glute pump finisher. I could do an upper body pump finisher, right? That's more metabolic stress based. So if it was a glute pump finisher, we'd band up, for instance, we band up hip thrusts, right? And do super high rep hip thrusts. So imagine if you were doing speed hip thrusts for like 50 seconds and then went from that into a lateral band walk for 50 seconds and then went into a squeeze a med ball, like long lever glute bridge, because really it hits the hamstrings and adductors. I mean, it's toast, right? It's toast, but what are we doing? We're working with extra metabolic stress, volume for that backside, which a lot of people want. So I gave you both scenarios, right? Because we said that we can rotate metabolic stress and power conditioning in and out in these programs, okay? So with that said, again, like the reason I wanted to show you this, because I'm writing it as I'm talking to you guys, and it fits the buckets, right? It fits our buckets. And so you have a model, and what I like to call, like, to me, this is like basketball, right? I like to have a lot of basketball analogies, obviously, because basketball was my life for a long time and it saved my life. But it's like boundaries in a basketball court. You can dribble a lot of places, but you can't go out of bounds, right? So I'm trying to create boundaries for you with some rules, just like basketball has rules. Can't kick people, right? Get a technical, get thrown out, right? So there's rules to stick to, but now this creates a frame of being able to create these programs fast. And what I really want you guys to do is, whether today you have time or over the weekend, I want you to set a timer for 30 minutes, just for 30 minutes. And I want you to see, based on this model and the things that we went through, how many programs, how many months of programming you can write for small group. Listen, I've done this with smaller groups, with big companies where we came in, because one of the reasons that I was brought in was like, our coaches are spending too much time writing this stuff. The programs aren't as great as we want them to be. And they're complaining because they said it's taking hours and hours and hours to write these programs. I was like, okay, cool. Let's come in. Let's do the exercises, and then let's have them write the programs, right? And it was basically like, I'm not exaggerating, like 8 to 10 times less time writing programs, better programs with the model. And they were like, whoa, how much time and energy is that saving to your team, getting clients better results? It's just a big win-win situation. So with that said, I'm going to take a quick sip. Quick sip. I'll be right back. All right.